Well, good morning. May I begin today by extending to all members of Toronto's Jewish community a very happy Hanukkah. The Festival of Lights and Rededication, which is what Hanukkah is known as, begins tonight, and I hope all those celebrating will do so happily and safely with a keen eye to public health protocols, as will be the case with all of the holidays that are upcoming. So the Executive Committee meets today for our last meeting of 2020. One of the key items up for discussion today is the 2021 rate supported budgets. And you may not know what that means, but for members of the public, it means the water budget, the solid waste budget, in other words, mostly garbage and recycling and related matters, and the Toronto Parking Authority, which takes in its own revenue to pay its expenses. We know that for most people in their personal and business lives, it will be a tough budget year. And I think a lot of you understand that it has been a tough budget year for the city itself, with shortfalls we faced because of low transit ridership, for example, and a host of other things. COVID-19 and the public health measures that have been needed to try to stop the virus have hit our businesses and our residents very hard. So that's why the 2021 water and waste budgets significantly reduce previously planned rate increases while still preserving services that Toronto residents rely on. As many of you know who follow City Hall, rate increases for solid waste and for Toronto Water are planned years in advance for predictable budgeting, so that as they make plans to replace things and make improvements, they budget those in advance, and the rate increase schedule is set out years in advance. Before COVID-19, Toronto Water had been planning for a 3% increase for 2021 next year, and solid waste had been planning for a 2.7% increase for next year, 2021. Today, the Executive Committee will be considering a 1.5% increase for both solid waste and Toronto Water. Cutting this increase in half, the planned increases in half, is the right and the responsible thing to do. So I'll be commending those budgets to the Executive Committee for their approval, and the same through on to City Council next week. Both solid waste and Toronto Water found $10.8 million in savings to help them keep these rates down. And they did that without cutting services. And I want to commend our staff of water and solid waste for their efforts in that regard. Cost-saving measures included a hiring slowdown, a voluntary separation process we went through, and cancellation of progression pay for non-union staff. Most important, though, that for people to understand is that even though they are and we are constraining these rate increases, we are not slowing down the capital investments that we are making in our infrastructure, especially our water infrastructure, that we have worked so hard to get back on track after years of underinvestment. The 2021 Toronto Water budget will make a $1.3 billion investment in Toronto Water infrastructure, and that is the highest in Toronto Water's history after 2019 and 2020, when we also spent more than $1 billion on water infrastructure in each year. And I think the members of the public understand how important it is for us to have that infrastructure in place so that we can deliver, without you ever having to worry about it. Safe, clean water, when the tap is turned on, it turns on every morning. And I think this is very important. You might want to know where the funding goes, because oftentimes when we mention these big amounts of money, it's hard to contemplate that. Our $14.8 billion 10-year capital plan for Toronto Water invests in basement flooding, storm water management, and we've seen the impacts that these more frequent storms have now on people's lives, on their personal lives, and on the infrastructure of the city itself. Underground infrastructure is a source of big investment, and water filtration and other activities at Toronto Water Plant. These are all things that we do to mitigate the effects of climate change, yes, but also to make sure that we can deliver safe, clean water to people every day. $2.2 billion of that number over the next 10 years is for the basement flooding protection program. Something that I know is so important to Toronto residents. I've been to the neighborhoods and seen the devastation that results from climate change, frankly, and the storms that we're experiencing. And it has been an issue over and over again for so many people who get their basements flooded over and over again and, frankly, run out of the ability to get insurance. The plan will ensure the completion of environmental assessments for all basement flooding study areas, of which there are many in the city, by 2024. This budget also invests millions in water main replacement. And sometimes the construction, I know, aggravates you if you're driving or biking in the city. But at the end of the day, we're replacing water mains that in some cases are more than 100 years old. So I guess you might well say it's about time. But this work has to be done, and we are investing in this, but we're doing it while still keeping the rate increases for this year to 1.5%. I want to thank Budget Chief Gary Crawford and the councillors on the Budget Committee for bringing these rate budgets forward and for recommending those lower rate increases so that we can keep providing services that we know people rely on, keep increases as low as possible, and invest in the infrastructure we know that we will need to make sure the city can come back from the pandemic stronger and safer and better than ever. Now, also to be considered today is the proposed vacant home tax. As has been the case since I first requested from the province the legislative authority that we didn't have so that we could initiate such a tax, I support moving ahead. I strongly support moving ahead with the proposed vacant home tax so as to encourage vacant properties to be used for housing and not just to continue to sit empty. This is a levy that is supported by a broad range of councillors across the city, from wards across the city, because I believe they support it because it just makes sense. I was encouraged to read a recent Toronto Star editorial which described the proposed vacant home tax as a no-brainer that pretty much everyone has concluded is long overdue. In a democracy, pretty much everyone doesn't mean everyone, so we have to have a debate, and that's a good thing. And a number of the features of the tax that are proposed in the report will be discussed. But I think in principle, this is something whose time has come so that we can make housing available that is presently sitting vacant, or for those who choose not to make the housing available. In Vancouver, thousands of units were made available to the public to rent or to buy after the tax was brought in. Other people choose to pay the tax, but it is their choice. Toronto Sun ran a column from a realtor saying it was hard to see a downside to the vacant home tax. And I know there have been other columns published in the Sun that have said otherwise, but at the same time, I'm glad to see there's fairly broad support for this. I say we've got to proceed ahead with this right now because the work necessary to put the tax in place, the administrative machinery, as it were, will take until next year, through next year. So the tax itself won't be in place until 2022. The staff do estimate that at 1% of a property's value, this would raise between $55 and $66 million per year. But the objective here isn't to raise money, although that money will, for example, be able to help us use support more affordable housing. The objective is to free up housing units so people can rent them in a city that is short of housing, and people can rent those houses or own them if they're put up for sale. So either which way, either through the money that's collected, which will, for example, go to help with affordable housing, or through people freeing up the housing to be made available to others, we will end up with more housing, both ways. You can live in it, you can rent it, but if it sits empty, you will pay a tax on it. And if that helps us to build or make available more housing for people, then I think it is something that is a worthy goal. We simply can't afford, from the housing supply perspective, to have housing accommodation potentially for thousands of people sitting empty in a city that is growing like the city and that will grow again when the pandemic is over. That is the objective we have kept in mind throughout this term with all of our different initiatives. We need more housing for everyone, from all income groups, everywhere in our city, so that the success we experienced before the pandemic can continue, and so that we can be a city that is home and can be home for all different kinds of people. We will hear from residents today. There are a number of deputations on the vacant home tax. I'm sure some are opposed and some are in favor. That's the nature of the meetings we have. And that's why I think this meeting is a very important one, so that we can hear from people to help us to make sure that we get it right. The final thing I'll make reference to today is the Transit Expansion Projects report that is on the agenda as well. This report provides an important update on two of the city's priority transit projects, the Scarborough-Eglinton East LRT and the Waterfront Transit. Both of these projects will bring more transit to two areas of the city that absolutely need it, the Waterfront and Scarborough. I met with all of the federal MPs earlier this week who represent Toronto, and I know that especially the Scarborough MPs, but all of the Toronto MPs treat these as important projects. They are particularly interested in seeing the Scarborough-Eglinton East LRT proceed forward. And they're delighted to know that this report represents an indication of the progress that is being made. I know that they're as determined as I am to get the Eglinton East LRT built and to make the meaningful difference it will make to transit users in Scarborough, including people in Malvern, people in U of T Scarborough campus, and many, many other neighborhoods. This Eglinton East LRT will travel through or beside 7 neighborhood improvement areas and bring higher transit order to within walking distance of 49,000 new people. The project is worth doing, And I know that as we move forward, our partners in getting transit built, especially the Government of Canada, won't be far behind us in making the commitment to move forward with this. As mayor, I am determined to continue to keep transit moving forward in all areas of the city. That is why we're moving these two projects ahead and why we are continuing to work with the province on its selected list of major transit projects that will all, in combination, make a huge difference to getting people around the city in a way that is faster and better and safer and more accessible, but is also friendlier to the environment and connecting people up to opportunity. So I hope we'll have a good meeting today, and I'm now open for your questions.
Thank you, Mayor Tory. Now we'll take questions from the media. One follow-up. First up, we have Jennifer Pagliaro from the Toronto Star. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Good morning, Mayor.
Morning.
I wanted to ask you about a couple of things that are actually not on the agenda. The first thing is, I'm sure you saw that the province has 12 billion in COVID contingency funds that it hasn't spent yet, and I wonder if you've had any conversations. I know you speak to the Premier often about how those funds might benefit the city and whether any of those will be forthcoming for a lot of the various needs you've spoken to us about on a pretty daily basis.
I've had a number of conversations with the Premier and even more conversations with the Finance Minister, Rod Phillips, about this. And let's be fair, some of that money is money that came, for example, through the restart process that was initiated by both the federal and provincial governments. And so, for example, we have a second stage ask-in, having received, I think, about $500 million plus in the first stage for transit and for other municipal purposes like shelters and so on. And they had us apply for and specify what we needed in the second stage in order to make our books balance for 2020 after the effects of the pandemic. And so I think those answers are forthcoming. In fact, I know they are because I've been in conversation this week with those ministers and as well as the Minister of Transportation. And so some of that money is there. If there is more, and I haven't had a chance to go through and precisely examine what's in each of those reserves and decide what might be appropriately allocated to the City of Toronto for some of our needs, but I will do so. I should also point something else out. Governments are required to have reserves. Governments need to have contingency funds, just like people, I think, try to do in their own lives. And so the notion that the government would have some reserves set aside or some contingency funds doesn't surprise me. I don't expect them to have every penny of that allocated to us. I think that we will be pushing for additional help for the City of Toronto, as I've been mentioning many, many times in 2021. I'll be honest with you. The response to that so far has not been, to my liking in the context that neither government has yet committed to having a restart 2.0, which will apply to some of the shortfalls we are going to experience in 2021 because of transit shortfalls, just as an example. And I'll be releasing this morning, it may have already just been released, a letter that I've written to the Prime Minister and to the Premier, asking them at the meeting they're having today to take up that matter, even briefly. I know they want to focus on other matters like healthcare, and that's very important. But I would ask them to indicate to the public and to the cities across Canada now that they will be embarking on a series of discussions soon to provide for a restart 2.0 that might in turn allocate some of that money, the very same money we're talking about, to cities across Ontario and across Canada to help them with their shortfalls.
And just on a separate topic, I know that there's an update on the transit plan on the executive agenda. We were expecting to see some kind of update from the TTC on the status of the SRT and its continued lifespan. I'm wondering if you've been briefed on the extent to which the SRT can keep running as we await a Scarborough subway.
I have been briefed on that, and of course there are some time constraints because there comes a point in time where you just can't keep something like that running anymore. It's like an old car. You can keep repairing it, but sooner or later you run out of options for repair. And so we're very, very focused on that because obviously we have to make sure that if that is not going to continue to run until such time as the Scarborough subway is open, that we have to provide for alternate means of transit. I will say that there are very active discussions going on now between the TTC and Metrolinx with respect to exactly how long we have to provide that alternate transit service for, because it will not be the case that we can keep the SRT going until the Scarborough subway is finished. But they're talking about exactly how long that kind of service is going to be required, because that to some extent would influence the choices we make in terms of making good use of the taxpayers and TTC's money. So I would hope that you'll have a report from the TTC very soon on that, but there are very active discussions underway, and it's a great source of focus just because of the need to make plans.
Thanks, Jennifer. Next up, we have Nicholas Haddad from Radio Canada. Go ahead, Nicholas.
Hi there. How you doing, Mayor Tory?
Thanks. How are you?
Yeah, I'm really well. Thanks. Also a transit loop related question. I'm working on a story where we're looking at the Ottawa experience to kind of see how light rail projects can turn out when it comes to entry into service. So as we go forward with, more lines, potentially some new ones that we might discuss today, what kind of assurances are you seeking from, manufacturers like SNC-Lavalin or some of the companies operating with Metrolinx that taxpayers are actually going to get what they pay for? And feel free to mention the Ottawa experience and why we're not going to be looking at something like that.
I'm not going to stand here and be critical of Ottawa or in any way kind of take advantage of a situation they had that was very difficult. When you have major projects, I know even from running a large company where we weren't starting rail lines, but we were starting telecom networks and we were starting systems that, when you're having a big complex system, there can be problems. And I say that understanding that of both the manufacturers and of the operators. So I would only say that when we see those experiences take place, especially on projects similar to ones we have underway in Toronto, you learn from it. And I will tell you right now on the Eglinton Crosstown LRT, for example, they are testing trains as we speak. They've begun to actually test trains underground. And that gives people hope, I guess, that the thing's actually going to be running before too long. It's a while to go yet to finish the construction. And so, I think that we talk to the manufacturers, we talk to the construction companies, and try to learn those lessons every single day so that we can have a better start to the crosstown than was the case in Ottawa. And I say that not trying to take advantage of Ottawa's situation, but just to say you learn from these things. And we will do our best when Eglinton and Finch and the Scarborough East LRT and the Waterfront LRTs all open, that they're open as seamlessly and efficiently as possible.
Follow-up?
No, I don't have one. Thanks very much, though.
Okay, that's it for today. Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Have
you
a
all very
great
much.
day.
Okay.